I arrived early, way earlier than I needed to. The venue still smelled of fresh flowers and last-minute stress. Staff rushed around placing centerpieces and checking linens, but I wasn't watching them. My eyes were on the stage, the place my little brother would stand in just a few hours, marrying the love of his life. I should have been buzzing with excitement, but something didn't sit right in my chest. Still, I brushed it off. Nerves, maybe. I was just emotional. I had helped with everything. From tasting the cake samples when he and his fiancée were busy with work, to redesigning their seating chart twice when last-minute guests RSVP'd. I stayed up late, sewing together ribbon bundles for the wedding favors when the vendor messed up the delivery. I paid for the calligraphy on their invitations, quietly, without a fuss, because that's what family does, right? As I straightened out one of the napkins on a table, I imagined what the day would be like. Laughs, dancing, maybe a few tears during the speeches. I wondered if he'd mention me. Not that I needed the spotlight, God, no, but just a small thank you. Something that said, "Hey, I saw you. I appreciate you." That would have been enough. I had even turned down a big work presentation that clashed with the rehearsal dinner. My boss was furious, but I told myself, this is once in a lifetime. My brother needs me. And deep down, I wanted to feel like I belonged. Like this family I'd always carried on my back might finally turn around and see me standing there too. The decorations were perfect. The menu, custom planned with their favorite foods, looked mouth-watering. I watched the bride's family arrive first, greeting everyone with glowing smiles. Then came mine. Our parents, some cousins, aunts. My brother didn't even glance around to find me. But again, I let it go. Big day. So much going on. He'd see me soon. I smoothed my dress and smiled at a guest passing by. Today would be beautiful, I told myself. Today, I'd finally feel part of something. I had no idea that by nightfall, I'd feel more invisible than ever. The ceremony was lovely. She looked stunning. He looked nervous but happy. Vows were exchanged. Rings slipped on, and the kiss earned a round of applause that echoed through the vineyard. I clapped, too, smiling, pretending everything felt as perfect as it looked. But something had started to gnaw at me. Something small at first, like a loose thread you can't quite place. After the ceremony, the photographer started directing the family photos. "Okay, we'll get the immediate family first," he said, waving everyone over. I stepped forward, but the photographer looked right through me. My mom ushered my brother, his bride, and their parents into position. Then came the groomsmen, bridesmaids, cousins. Even our second cousin Sarah, who flew in from another state, was asked to join a group shot. Me. No one said my name. No one looked my way. I stood awkwardly to the side, waiting. Maybe they were saving a special one for siblings. That had to be it. But it never came. The photographer clicked away, then started packing up. My chest tightened. I walked over to my mother, trying to keep my voice light. "Hey, was there a photo with siblings?" She gave me a confused smile. "Oh, honey, I think they just ran out of time." "Don't worry." But they didn't run out of time. They took over 100 photos. Later, during the speeches, I held my breath when my brother took the mic. He thanked his new in-laws, his childhood best friend, even a co-worker who helped him with honeymoon plans. He mentioned growing up with unwavering support, and I leaned in, certain this was it. But then he looked over at our parents and smiled. "You too gave me everything. You taught me what real love looks like." That was it. No mention of me. Not a word. Not even a glance. My throat burned. I laughed softly into my champagne glass, pretending I wasn't holding my breath, pretending it didn't matter. But inside I felt it, that slow, quiet cracking, like I had somehow died in their memory and no one told me. I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased, like I had never mattered to begin with. And in that moment, surrounded by glittering lights and polite claps, I started to question if I'd been fooling myself all along. I waited until the dance floor had filled and the lights dimmed a little, casting soft golden shadows across the tables. I needed to know. I needed to understand why. Maybe it was an oversight. Maybe stress had made him forget. That's what I told myself as I made my way toward him, weaving through laughing guests and clinking glasses. He stood near the bar, sipping something dark, his new wife by his side. I waited for her to turn away, then stepped in quietly. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile. He turned, surprised. "Oh, hey." I hesitated. "Can I talk to you for a second?" He nodded and followed me a few steps away from the crowd. I could still hear the music humming behind us, but it felt distant, muted like I was underwater. I started swallowing hard. I noticed I wasn't in the family photos, or mentioned in your speech. And I don't mean to make this about me really, but it hurt. I've been here through everything. I helped with the wedding, the planning, the bills. His expression didn't shift, just this unreadable, distant look. I kept going, hoping something would click in his head. You know I had to turn down a huge meeting to be here this weekend. I've done everything I could to support you. He stared at me for a beat too long. Then he shrugged. Honestly, he said, his voice flat, this day isn't about people who never made us proud. The words hit like ice water down my back. I blinked, not sure I heard him right. What? I breathed. He didn't flinch. You've always been the odd one out. You do your own thing, keep to yourself, and honestly, you've never really fit the mold. You moved out, barely come around, and when you do, you act like you're doing everyone a favor. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. My chest tightened. Fit the mold. I repeated, I've bailed you out of rent twice. I stayed up all night editing your resume when you got fired. I've given and never asked for anything back. He scoffed lightly. Well, thanks, I guess. But today's not about you. It's about family. I stared at him, stunned. And I'm not that. He didn't answer. My hands were trembling, but I nodded. That was all I could do. No tears. No more words. Okay, I whispered. Got it. I turned and walked back to my table by the exit, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the music. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not in anger, not even in sadness. Just finality. He made it clear I didn't belong. So I decided, right then, that I wouldn't pretend anymore either. As I sat at my table near the exit, staring blankly at the champagne bubbles in my glass, the music faded into background noise. My brother's words still echoed in my head. People who never made us proud. I wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so wildly untrue, it almost felt like a cruel joke. They didn't know the memories I carried, the ones I never asked credit for. They didn't know that when we were kids and he broke Dad's expensive watch, I told him it was me. I took the grounding, the yelling, the icy silence for a week because he was scared. He was just a kid, and I figured that's what big sisters do. They didn't know that during college, when he was failing his math class and terrified of losing his scholarship, I stayed up for nights helping him cram, rewriting notes, tutoring him even when I had my own finals. I skipped parties, gave up a spring break trip, all so he could pass. They didn't know that when he lost his job at 25 and moved back home with nothing, I quietly sent our parents money every month to cover the extra bills. I told them to pretend it was their idea, to protect his pride. And when he started that side hustle selling art prints, I was his first buyer. I made fake accounts just to boost his reviews. And maybe the one that stings the most, I passed on grad school in another city because Mom cried about losing the glue of the family. I stayed. I settled for a job I didn't love just to keep the peace, just to be close. I did it all without expectation. No medals, no applause, not even acknowledgement. I didn't need it. But being called a disappointment? Being told I didn't make them proud? That broke something sacred. They had no idea how many times I'd put myself last. How many doors I quietly closed on my own future, thinking I was helping to build something that mattered. Something we could all stand inside together. But the truth was, I was building a home that only ever had one locked door, and I was always on the other side of it. And now they'd shut it for good. I sat there, alone at the table by the exit, the room full of laughter, chatter, and the clinking of glasses. It felt as if the whole world was celebrating, and I was an outsider watching from behind a foggy window. My hands were cold. I could still hear the faint buzz of the music, but it didn't reach me. I was in a bubble of my own, a place where my brother's words replayed over and over, cutting deeper each time. This day isn't about people who never made us proud. It was as if the very foundation of everything I had believed about family had crumbled, and I had been left standing in the ruins, unsure of what to do next. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But what good would that do? I had already tried to fit in, to be the good sister, to do what was right. But none of it mattered. None of it had ever mattered. The silence around me felt suffocating, the hum of the event now distant. I couldn't even bring myself to look at the dance floor, where couples spun around in joy. Instead, I just stared at the untouched champagne in my glass, the bubbles rising, popping with a tiny fizz. I wanted to drop the glass to the floor, shatter it, and let the sound fill the space. But I didn't. And then, like a slow burn, something shifted inside me. The quiet sting of betrayal morphed into something else. Something stronger. A realization. A seed planted deep in the soil of my heart that had been waiting for this moment to bloom. I wasn't going to sit here quietly anymore. I wasn't going to let them forget me again. If they wanted to erase me, fine. But I would leave a mark so lasting they would never be able to get rid of it. I would make sure of that. My fingers tightened around the stem of the glass, and I stood up. The floor beneath my feet seemed to vibrate with new energy. I wasn't invisible. Not anymore. This wasn't just about what I had been robbed of. It was about the power I now held. The power to take control. And I knew exactly what to do. I left the table without looking back. My movements were deliberate, controlled. Everything was quiet, despite the chaos around me. The wedding was still in full swing. Guests were dancing, laughing, lost in the celebration. But I wasn't a part of it anymore. Not in any way that mattered. I stepped outside into the cool night air, the faint hum of the party muffled behind me. My phone was in my hand before I even realized it, my fingers moving with a purpose I couldn't quite explain. The catering company's number was already saved in my contacts. I had made sure of that earlier when I was helping organize everything. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the call button for a moment, as if the decision had yet to fully settle inside me. But it had. I wasn't going to back down now. The ringing on the other end felt too loud, too sharp. It echoed in my ears like a ticking clock, counting down the final moments of the choice I had just made. It felt like 100 voices screaming at me to stop, telling me that I was overreacting, that there was no need to take things this far. But the voice inside me, the voice that had been silenced for years, was louder now. "Good evening," a voice answered. "How can I assist you?" I took a breath. "I need to cancel the final payment for the wedding." The woman on the other end paused. I'm sorry, could you clarify? You'd like to cancel?" I let the question hang in the air for a moment, my fingers tapping lightly on the side of the phone. Part of me wanted to hesitate, to think it through, but I couldn't. I was tired of thinking. Tired of being the good sister, the one who always helped, the one who bent over backward for people who wouldn't even show me the smallest amount of gratitude. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos building inside me. "I want to cancel the final payment. I don't want any of the food to be delivered." I could hear her typing on the other end. "Are you sure, ma'am? We've already prepared." "I'm sure," I interrupted softly. "Cancel it all." There was a long pause, and I could feel her confusion through the phone. But I didn't care. No more hesitation, no more explaining myself. I was done with trying to be the person everyone could rely on, only to be overlooked when it mattered. "I'll also need to change the contact info for any future correspondence," I added, my voice even. "Make sure the payment doesn't go through." Another silence. Then she simply replied, "Understood, ma'am. I'll take care of that right away." I hung up the phone before she could say anything else. The night air felt colder now, but there was a warmth spreading inside me, a sense of power, however small. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't fought. I'd simply acted. And in that quiet, simple decision, I had just taken the first step in making them realize what it felt like to be forgotten. The first few minutes were filled with confusion. Guests glanced at each other, wondering if the delay was just a temporary hiccup. The air was still thick with laughter, people sipping their drinks, chatting, but there was an underlying tension that hadn't been there before. "Isn't the first course supposed to be served by now?" someone asked, looking at the empty tables. The silver platters that had once gleamed with anticipation now sat still untouched. The clink of glasses seemed louder now, the conversations a little more strained. I sat in my quiet corner, just beyond the reach of the ballroom lights, watching it all unfold. I didn't have to say a word. No explanations. No dramatic confrontations. It was all happening without me needing to lift a finger. Then I saw him, the groom, my brother, standing at the far end of the room. He looked like he was about to burst. His jaw was clenched, his eyes scanning the crowd like he was looking for someone to blame. "Where's the food?" he muttered under his breath, walking hurriedly toward the catering manager. I could hear the panic in his voice, even from across the room. Why is nothing coming out? The manager, sweating under the pressure, scrambled to explain. There's been a delay, sir. The delivery is... No, my brother cut him off, his voice rising slightly. This is the first course. Why are we even waiting for it? It should have been here by now. What the hell is going on? I didn't need to be close to hear the tension in his words. Guests were starting to notice now, their conversations halting. Some people fidgeted in their seats. Others exchanged awkward glances. It was impossible to ignore the growing awkwardness. Whispers began to float around the room. Maybe there's a problem with the kitchen? Shouldn't the wedding planner have confirmed everything was ready? The caterers were running around now, faces flushed with embarrassment. They checked their phones, muttered among themselves, but the food never came, not even the appetizers. Then the family, sensing the unease, began to unravel in their own way. My parents were suddenly up pacing, looking for answers, offering explanations that were half-hearted at best. My mother shot a nervous look at my brother, who was growing visibly more anxious. The room was filling with a strange, uncomfortable tension. Every minute felt like an hour. And through it all, I just sat there watching. The satisfaction bubbling inside me wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, calculated. For once, I didn't have to justify my actions. The reality of the situation spoke louder than anything I could have said. The groom, now visibly flustered, hurried back to the head table, scanning the crowd as if expecting someone to step forward and fix this disaster. But no one did. I glanced over at him once more, noticing how desperate he looked. His newlywed smile had faded, and all that remained was the truth. This day, the one he'd made all about appearances, was now falling apart in front of him. No one knew what was happening, not truly. But I knew, and for once, I didn't care to explain. The room was still in chaos. The food crisis had reached its peak, and whispers had turned into loud conversations. My brother was trying, failing, to put on a brave face, attempting to placate the guests, offering them drinks and excuses. But it was clear. The magic of his wedding day was unraveling at the seams. Guests were now staring at the empty tables, awkwardly trying to make the best of it. Some looked at the groom, some at the catering team, and then, as if drawn by an invisible force, their eyes slowly shifted to me. I was still sitting by the exit, watching it all with quiet detachment, the weight of the situation settling comfortably in the pit of my stomach. The world was now turning its attention on me, in a way I hadn't anticipated. At first, I had been a quiet presence, unnoticed in the corner. But as the night wore on, I became the subtle center of the storm. The truth, unspoken but undeniable, was written on their faces. My absence from the speeches, my exclusion from the photos. Those things had come back to haunt them. It wasn't long before my brother, his eyes frantic with frustration, made his way over to me. He stopped in front of my table, his posture tense, his gaze shifting from the empty tables to my calm face. He opened his mouth to speak, but his words faltered. He couldn't quite grasp what to say anymore. All his rehearsed lines about gratitude and family, about how today was supposed to be perfect, now felt hollow. I could see the realization in his eyes, and it stung him more than any harsh word I could have thrown at him. "You," he began, then paused, his voice cracking. "Why would you do this?" There was no anger in me anymore, just a quiet, steady calmness that had grown within me in the past few hours. I didn't need to yell, didn't need to explain. He'd made his choice a long time ago, and now he had to live with it. I looked at him, meeting his gaze without blinking, and shook my head slowly. "You don't get to ask that now," I said, my voice low but resolute. "Not after everything." The guilt started creeping into his eyes, but it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't the person who needed to be fixed. I wasn't the one who had let myself be forgotten. The weight of his regret settled over him, but it didn't belong to me. I stood up, gracefully, without a hint of bitterness. My eyes met those of the people still glancing at me, and for a brief moment, there was nothing left to prove. No words to say, no justifications to make. I had already said everything I needed to say without a single word. My actions had done all the talking. I took one last look at my brother, the man I had once loved with all my heart, the man who had meant the world to me. Now he was just another figure in a room full of people who couldn't see what was right in front of them. Without another glance, I turned and walked toward the exit. I didn't need anyone to follow. I didn't need their apologies or their guilt-ridden eyes. I had made my peace. The night wasn't mine anymore. But I knew one thing for sure. Their day had become mine, and they would never forget it.